Is the NFL Combine even worth your time anymore?
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL here on another wonderful Tuesday. You've got Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL, myself, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson, Nola, two of your NFL experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And on today's episode of Locked On NFL, we're going to be taking a look at our yike and our like, including Andy Reid. The Chiefs, could they be back at it again for the foreseeable future? We're also going to be taking a look at whether or not the NFL Combine is slowly dying, and it all begins with two quarterbacks who are at the top of the NFL draft board saying, nah, we're good. So we're going to be breaking all of that down and how you should feel about the NFL Combine moving forward. We appreciate you, as always, for being an everydayer here on Locked On NFL, and for, of course, making us your first listen of the day every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And, of course, today's episode of Locked On NFL brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. First-time customers will get $150 in bonus bets by simply winning your first $5 bet. Go check them out today, FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So, Luke, we've got two big name quarterbacks. USC quarterback Caleb Williams, who's expected to be the first overall selection in the NFL draft, as well as Heisman winning LSU quarterback Jayden Daniels, who's maybe going to be seen as a top 3 guy. We'll see what happens there. Both guys saying that they're going to go to Indianapolis for the NFL Scouting Combine, but they're going for different reasons. They're not going to be doing on-field stuff. So with all of that in mind, does this sort of signify a little bit that the NFL Scouting Combine, at least nowadays on field, doesn't necessarily have the value that it used to have for these top level guys?
I have a really spicy way of answering this question.
I'm ready for this. I love
it. Never had that value.
No,
we just like had a lot of information that was bad, and it led to a lot of bad draft misses. Because that information, while on the aggregate, if you aggregate combine scores over the entire history of the NFL, there is a correlation between combine score and success. It is a very loose correlation. There are a lot of counterexamples. There are guys who bombed the combine who did great. There are guys who blew up the combine who did not end up being good players, because a lot of other things can happen. You can get hurt. You can get coaching that doesn't vibe with you, right? You can get a coach will try to change the way that you do this with your arm, and it ruins everything for you, and now you never get it back. All kinds of things can happen that have nothing to do with your like raw measured athleticism. It was always it was better data than your jersey number, but I don't know if it was ever good data. And in football, I don't know if there is such thing as good data. A good R squared, if you want to use a real math term, which essentially measures how strong a correlation is. If you want a good R squared, it is like 0.25, which like if you turn that into a stats class in college in a math program, you would get an F if you turn it into
you're passing.
Yeah, you need at least 0.5 to be like considered statistically relevant. But football is just a weird sport. There's a lot of things going on. So we can talk about the efficacy of those drills as well. But when it comes to Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels, here's what I think is the pattern. And we've been here for a while. I think this is the state of affairs with the combine. If you're going 1 overall, you got nothing to prove. You don't need to go to the combine and throw around and show out the way that you may be used to. Matt Stafford went to the combine. Everybody knew Matt Stafford was going to be number 1 overall. If he got hurt at the combine, which was basically the only thing that could happen to him, it would have been, the story of the century. He didn't, there's nowhere for Caleb Williams to go. He's at number 1. There's nothing more for him to prove. That contract is pre-negotiated for the most part. There is nothing for him to gain at the NFL combine. Why would he go? He's going to throw a little bit at his pro day in a more controlled environment, in a place that he's used to being at, in a locker, not in a foreign city, not in a foreign time zone, right? It's a lot of these guys are choosing to go work out at their pro day. People are a little bit more wary of pro day data because pro day data tends to be biased in favor of the students.
Pretty favorable. Yeah.
Huh. I wonder what that is. But ultimately, and you had this conversation a while ago, I think the combine used to be not great data, but it was the data we had. And we just have better data now.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think, like, okay, let's look at this. So in getting ready for this episode, one of the things that I did was that I went and I looked at draft winners and combine winners and combine losers from the last couple of years, specifically looking at the quarterback position. Although this is also, by the way, happening with Ohio State wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., who's expected to be the first wide receiver off the board. Similar situation to what we're discussing here. Same thing. They'll show up in Indianapolis because there are still things that are valuable. Interviews, kind of doing all that kind of stuff, both the media interviews as well as the team interviews. Like, there's value in all that. But workout wise, all three of them intending to not do much in terms of field workouts. But a loser from last year's combine from several big media outlets was Bryce Young. And where did he get drafted? Number 1 overall. 2 years ago, two winners at the quarterback position were Malik Willis and Desmond Ridder. Both guys drafted. Yeah, how they doing, right? And a loser in that same year's draft was Matt Corral, who effectively had a similar trajectory. And so I think that like it's not a situation to where you kind of roll away from this and go, oh yeah, definitively the combine helps. Definitively the combine hurts. There are some guys for which the combine makes a huge difference. Like, I don't want to downplay that at all. And from an entertainment value perspective, it's incredibly entertaining to watch as a fan. But I think that what we're learning is that the value of the actual metrics, and we're going to get into this conversation a little bit deeper here in just a sec, isn't as valuable as maybe we originally anticipated, as you argue, maybe never was. But from the quarterback spot here, yeah, it makes perfect sense. These guys know that they're going to be drafted high. They know that they've done well for themselves. Why go out there and potentially risk the potential for injury?
Like, what if you have an off day too?
Right. Or have a terrible day. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what if you just didn't do, I think all the time about the Teddy Bridgewater gloves thing. He decides to throw without gloves for the first time at his pro day. Stupid decision, totally sank his draft stock.
Yeah.
And he wore gloves for the rest of his career. So that was clearly not a good allegory, but it got in teams' heads. And we have so much time now. This is happening a full 2 months before the draft. You've got so much time to overthink those metrics and all that. That said, if you're somebody like Michael Penix, who needs to prove that he's healthy, if you're somebody like JJ McCarthy, you're going to throw at the combine. When you got something to prove, if you got something to gain, yeah, you can go out and it's a great place to prove yourself in front of everybody on the big stage. But for we should just kind of stop expecting the high end guys to ever do anything at the combine. Honestly, I don't think Caleb Williams should do anything as pro day. Why?
I'm surprised he's doing pro day stuff. 100%. I'm super surprised he's doing pro day stuff. Like, don't just chill and collect
Lock yourself in a freezer and show up at Soldier Field on week 1. Like,
get your body right. Get your body right. And look, speaking of, or not speaking of, but like, if you think that, we're sitting here and we're kind of talking about this and we're just kind of like streaming into an echo chamber, we're not the only ones. In fact, there's some suggestion out there that coaches are beginning to feel the same way. It's not just players that aren't participating in this. There are some head coaches that aren't showing up. And so what does that tell us about the longevity potential of the combine? We're going to be breaking that down next as we continue on here with today's episode of Locked On NFL. And I'm also going to give you a really solid example of why participating in these events sometimes is greater to your detriment than it is to your benefit. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On NFL is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is therapy online made easy. If you had an hour of free time, what do you think you'd do with it? You could go potentially work out, take care of your body, but I say take care of your mental as well. And I think that's what therapy can be. It's maintenance for your mental health. It's something that can be incredibly helpful if you are going through something difficult and you need somebody to talk to. Therapy is very important, but even without that, it's important to just keep tabs on things, make sure you can maybe address problems before they become problems. You know what I mean? So go to betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. It's not just some players skipping out on the NFL Combine. We got coaches that are talking about and calling into question the value of the data that can be collected at the combine as well. We'll be breaking that down as we continue on today. Don't forget to also check out our Locked On Sports Today 24/7 national sports media YouTube stream, the first of its kind on YouTube. You can subscribe on YouTube today at Locked On Sports Today to take part in that first ever national sports 24/7 stream. So, Luke, before we dive into some of this coaching stuff, I want to tell a quick story. And this was an experience that I just had just this past weekend that's kind of relevant to the idea of the risk that comes with doing some of these events, all-star games, combine, stuff like that, can sometimes be greater than the reward. The HBCU Legacy Bowl is here in New Orleans at Yulman Stadium, where Tulane also plays its football games. And I was at the Legacy Bowl covering it this year. And the kind of top HBCU prospect is this quarterback out of North Carolina Central, Davius Richard. Really good arm, good anticipation, good field vision, has the duality of being able to, tuck it and run as well and stuff like that. He comes out, leads a 5-play touchdown drive, going 2 for 2 for 50+ yards, including a beautiful cover 2 hole shot down the left sideline. We love a cover 2 hole shot. And then scores a touchdown on a keeper around the right corner for about 4 yards and dislocates his ankle at the goal line as he falls into the end zone, and now has a 4 to 6 month recovery period ahead of him. And he was the one HBCU prospect that everyone looked at uniformly and went, he could be drafted this year, coming off of a year where no HBCU prospects were drafted. And I'm not saying that he made the wrong decision. I'm not criticizing his decision to be a part of that, anything. Everything, for all intents and purposes, he would have scored that touchdown, walked off that field, and never stepped foot on the field again in that all-star game. He would have done everything that he needed to do. He looked great in practice, looked great at the combine, all that stuff. And so the risk sometimes for me is greater than the reward. And I watched that play out right in front of my own eyes at Yulman Stadium this past weekend. And that's why I don't blame prospects like Marvin Harrison Jr., like Jayden Daniels, like Caleb Williams for saying, you know what? I'm good. I'll do it on my home turf, or I won't do it at all. I've done enough on tape.
Yeah, like there are guys who are, 4th round picks that have so much to gain, and sure, they can go prove something. We've seen plenty of guys show up to the combine, blow out the 40-yard dash, move up 2 rounds, and there's a lot of money in that, right?
Yep.
But here's what I'll say is, what is the combine for? Because I honestly don't think it's for these measurements anymore. They'll still do it out of a sense of legacy until every team goes, we don't really do these anymore. We just use the tracking data. But like, I know Matt LaFleur is not going to go to the combine. That's such an interesting thing. You're going to send people, right? It'll all be on TV. You get all the data. All the data is publicly reported anyways, so you don't need to be there with your binoculars watching them watch the 40 with your own hand timer. But one of the things that it can do from a team perspective is you can get your hands on a player. You can shake his hand. You can get a sense for his demeanor, which I think is really important, especially if it's, quarterback of the future, right? A lot of GMs look at that as, I'm staking my job on you. I'd like to have met you, even if it's just for a couple minutes. But the other thing you can do is you can coach him a little bit. And I think pro days can be really helpful for this too. So let's say there's somebody who I would like to change. I think it's either Dallas Turner or it's Latu, the UCLA edge. One of those 2 edges. I forget which is which because I watched them.
Latu is the UCLA edge.
UCLA, and then Dallas Turner is the Alabama edge. And one of them, I wanted to change. I thought it'd be interesting to see what he did if he changed. I think it's Dallas Turner. If he changed his lead foot. Because if you lead with your outside foot or your inside foot, depending on your stance, can change a whole bunch of things. I won't get into the weeds. That would be the kind of thing that I would look at the combine. I'd be like, hey, can I see a pass rush, but where you go from your other foot and just see how it feels? And I know I'm asking you to do something you're not familiar with, and I know it's going to look clunky, but I just want to see exactly how comfortable you are with me making a change on the fly. That can be really valuable data. It's not really measured data. It's not something you can put into a calculator, but that is still data. Immeasurable data, nebulous data is still data. That's the kind of thing I feel like you can get at these kinds of events, or even in the interview setting, just say, hey, can you go to the back of the room and show me what a stance would be like with your this foot up or your that foot up? I think that can be a really important thing at the combine. And ultimately, I don't think the combine will ever just end because it's still NFL Con. It's still agents and GMs first chance to go talk to each other off the record. It's still, it's TamperCon. Let's be honest. It's still where most of the contracts get hammered out. Yeah. That are then, negotiated within 12 seconds of league tampering opening. This is where that work actually gets done. And this is where reporters go and everything. Like, you're going for exactly this reason. You're not going to watch people run the 3-cone. You're going to get that information. I think that will always be the case, even if we have to sort of prop up this sort of mostly for show at this point measuring and testing event. That's not really what we're here for.
Right.
But I think as a fan, there are things you can watch for in the combine. And I think like you and I can learn stuff just about what it's supposed to look like. And you get, the commentary of like Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks that can really be helpful to lay people like me, and they can teach you something. I think that's worth your time if you're into that. But if you're an NFL coach, get your hands on him, meet a guy, see how he responds to this or that or whatever you're curious about with him. And other than that, if you want to figure out how fast a guy is, well, we've maybe got a better tool for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to think about the entire draft process as it is. Because at those pro days, you might not get an opportunity to get your hands, with that player. Do you get the chance to bring that player in on a top 30 visit where you can really go, okay, now run, take a running, take a running back and say, okay, now run these routes. Let me see what you can do from out of the backfield as a route runner, what you could do as a pass catcher outside of your frame. We're going to play
like crazy stuff. Ask your running back to run a post, see how it goes,
Yeah, exactly. Take your wide receiver and say, okay, we're going to move you closer and tight to a formation and see what kind of routes you can run from there out of the backfield. All these, like, there's so many things you can learn doing that, but you get 30 of those. And here's an opportunity for you to see 200, 300 plus people in the same place. Like, there's some value in that for sure. So like for us, I think the answer to the question, is the combine dying? It is no, when we're talking about the entire combine, but is the usefulness of the data that's retrieved during those workouts dying? Is that the more, kind of question that you would look at and go, yeah, there's some truth to that. PFT put out a report saying that several head coaches were not going to be present at the combine, including Rams coach Sean McVay, Dallas Cowboys coach Mike McCarthy. Luke, you mentioned Green Bay Packers coach Matt LaFleur. Robert Saleh is one that could be changing, they say, and then they're waiting on confirmation from 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan, who's like, one of the hottest topics in the NFL, maybe for the wrong reasons right now because they didn't know their overtime rules. But that, outside of that, like, that's a guy that you would expect is going to be there. But he's also trying to hire a defensive coordinator right now and all these other things.
Sure.
So
hey, it might be a good place to go have that conversation.
That could be a good place to do that for sure. And so, you look at all these pieces, and then even there was one in a now deleted tweet by an NFL coach is all I'm going to say. Because if he deleted the tweet, I want to respect that. But a coach that worked in sort of like sports science / like sports development / like conditioning, all that kind of stuff, strength coach type guy, was talking about like how the data is effectively obsolete, and that because now you can measure in-game speed, that gives you more usable data than a straight line 40-yard dash in your underwear gives you.
Sure. I think the bench press is the first one to go. They've actually talked about of deprecating the bench press and replacing it with something else that's a better allegory to how strong somebody is.
Cognitive tests are out. Nobody's taking them anymore.
Cognitive tests are... Don't make me say what I really think about this week.
Yes, I got it.
But so the bench press is a fascinating thing to me because it really measures nothing. Maybe for cornerbacks, it can measure how strong your jam is because that's essentially the same motion. But for a lineman, anybody in the trenches, anybody will tell you most of your power is coming from your hips, your thighs, your knees. That's the broad
relying
jump.
On your arm strength in the trenches, you're cooked.
Right. You're not going to get anywhere. Yeah. So the vertical jump and the broad jump for their linemen is what we really care about, which is funny. Like how high can the center jump? But you're looking for that explosion, right? But here's what I will say about the bench press. All right. I'm going to sound like such a boomer here.
All right.
I think that if you can kill it on the bench press, it tells me if you take the weight room as seriously as your peers do, and the guys that attack the weight room with the tenacity that they attack anything, that'll tell me something about you, because the weight room is the least fun place. There are a lot of players who do their best when football is fun. And there is nothing wrong with that. You can be that guy. Justin Jefferson's that kind of guy. He's doing all right. And so you can absolutely be that guy, be very, very successful. It's just a qualifier. It just tells me a little bit more, because if I have a coach that doesn't jive with that, maybe it wouldn't work out here as well as it would with, Kevin O'Connell.
Right.
But if you are killing it when it's the least fun, when it's all just work and pain, and it's not fun at all, and you are still being proud of your accomplishments and getting that, there might be something to that, right? Yep. It's a really little thing, but it's data, and you compile as much data as you can gather, whatever you can glean from it. That said, it's pretty minimal, and it's not a very great measure for actually how strong a guy is. So it's probably going to get left in the dust and replaced with something that's maybe a better simulation of NFL football.
It's so funny how much of what's most valuable out of all these conversations around the NFL Combine turns out to be the stuff you can't actually put a number to. Can you attack the weight room with a good tenacity? Can you show me that you take it seriously? How are your interviews? Can you show, I guess there's some, well, no, you're not going to put a number to, can you rush just as well off of your opposite lead foot and things like that? Like there's all of these things that are,
you have to go in with specific questions. I don't think you can come out of the combine saying, is this player good or not? You can do the relative athletic scores. They'll be all over your Twitter timeline. You can do that, and you can figure out just how rawly athletic someone is based on these archaic measurements we came up with 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. But you can't tell if a player is good at the combine. Right. You need to go in with specific questions. I'll give you another example real quick. Keely Ringo last year, Georgia corner. Mm-hmm. I remember watching him. I watched him before the combine, and I was like, man, this guy looks like he's really struggling to get turned around he struggles to decelerate. Mm-hmm. And without giving up a ton of space. So I was going, okay, is that just the turf? Was that just did I just catch him on a couple of off days? Can he physically decelerate? Maybe there's a technique thing, and you can imagine him getting coached out of it. He bombed the 3-cone, fell to the 4th round. He was getting talked about as a first-round player. Yep. When I watched him in February, around this time of year, he was getting talked about as a first-round player. Bombed the 3-cone, and everybody went, yeah, can't decelerate. Fell to the 4th round, didn't play for the Eagles, I think, at all, maybe any.
Yeah, or very, very few. Didn't have an impact, that's for sure.
He's a depth player. So, and that was it's like, if you can't decelerate on a comeback route, you're a backup corner.
Yep. Very, very simple. It's an incredible thing, but it's just the nuances of football and the ripple effects they create. It's one of the reasons why we love covering this sport so much. Mm-hmm. All right, coming up next, let's get to our yike and like, Luke, what we liked, what we didn't like from the week. Starting off with Andy Reid potentially keeping it going with the Kansas City Chiefs. And honestly, why not? We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. And if you are new to the good old world of gambling, you can find FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Any winning $5 bet. That means you can just go find whoever the biggest favorite is in the NBA tonight. You can just lay down $5 on that money line, even though it's going to have the shortest odds ever, and you can still get $150 back. That's a 30-1 odds on your $5 bet if you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and get started there. You can find all kinds of things, quick bets, same game parlays in the middle of a game. You go bet on something at halftime, go bet on some team winning winning by 30 and just take their halftime money line and whatever else you want. That is at FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
All right, everybody, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL with our usual yike and like. Yike, the thing that we didn't like from the week. Like, the thing that we did like from the week. And I'm going to start us off on the positive side here, Luke. But don't forget, we are your team every day. James and Chris here tomorrow breaking down everything when it comes to some of the prospects that you should be watching at this year's NFL Combine. Like we mentioned, the data, it can go either way for an NFL team, but for you, it's entertaining as all get out. So make sure you get that preview here on today's episode. So let's take a look at the positivity here. I'll be quick on this one. Andy Reid has been in the conversation of retirement over the course of the past 2 years. Been one of those guys that everybody kind of looks at and goes, oh, is he going to retire at the end of the season? All that other stuff. Goes out there, gets his back-to-back Super Bowl championships, and the talk continued. And now it sounds like he and the Chiefs are open to not discussing his future in that way, but discussing his future in terms of sticking around with Kansas City. And look, when you got an opportunity to go for the three-peat, I don't think you should go anywhere at all. So I don't think we're going to be seeing an Andy Reid retirement anytime soon, at least for the 2024 season. And I love it. And I'm very happy to hear about it.
What have we had, like 8 teams ever to go back to back? Nobody's ever three-peated? Yeah, you got to do that.
Yeah, you got to show up for that.
I'll do my like as well. The NFL Competition Committee will finally consider the XFL's kickoff rule. I think this is a no-brainer. This is like what the XFL is for. I guess it's the UFL now. Is not only as a proving ground for players who maybe couldn't make a team or whatever, and every once in a while you get like a Dylan Parham, or Donald Parham, whichever one.
Donald Parham, yeah.
Donald Parham, yeah. The other one's a guard.
Yeah,
the tight end for the Chargers, who manages, or even like a Taylor Heineke was an XFL alum back in 2020. That kind of thing. You can find those reclamation projects, a place for somebody to reinvigorate their career. Not only is it that, but it's also a testing ground for interesting rules and for ways of approaching the sport that makes the fan experience better. Like having a mic in the replay booth so that you can hear Dean Blandino saying, man, I don't know if he had his knee down there. There was so much less backlash to controversial calls in the XFL because you could hear the thought process and it gives you a perspective, and you can disagree, but at least still respect that's where they were at. And the kickoff, I think, is the biggest no-brainer, but took them 3 years to get to this point. 3 years to get to this point where the XFL had data that said, concussive hits were almost removed entirely. If you're unfamiliar, the kickoff rule is the same as normal kickoffs, except the kicking team starts 10 yards away from the receiving team and can't move until the ball is caught. So you're essentially simulating, and that was about on average where the kicking team would get when the ball is caught was about 10 yards away from everybody. And you just take away the running start. And then suddenly all the impact basically functions like any old run play. All the impact is taken away, but you still don't take the kickoff return itself away, which is what the NFL did this year. They made fair catches available, and there was really no reason to ever take one out. But it took them 3 years to admit that Sam Schwartzstein had a better idea than they could come up with, and that really must have hurt him. I mean, other than pride, I can't think of another reason why you wouldn't immediately couch that idea that the XFL advertised as like, please, NFL, take our ideas. We are here to test them for you.
Yep. Yeah.
Congratulations, Sam. You finally got through to him.
You got it, man. Good on you. If nothing else, a lesson in persistence and resilience. I absolutely love it. No, it's great. And I really hope that they do actually adopt that because, again, like player safety should be the thing, but this doesn't take the excitement of the kickoff out of the game this way, like you just get the ball starting on the 25 type of a rhythm would. So I'm all about that. All right, let me go to my yike here. I'm going to get a little negative here for a moment, but for me, I want to go to former Las Vegas Raiders cornerback Damon
Oakland
Arnett.
Raider.
Yeah, Oakland Raider too.
He didn't even make it to Vegas.
Yeah, man, that's true. Yeah, former Oakland Raider, former NFL player Damon Arnett, who recently was, according to reports from like Ian Rappaport and others, arrested with possession of, I'll just call it that Breaking Bad, and a possession of a firearm and all these other things. And my yike isn't that like I want to talk bad about this guy because clearly he's in need of something and I hope that he finds that. But my yike is just like there was so much sort of excitement. He wasn't like a first round exciting guy or anything like that, but like obviously like he worked very hard to get drafted. He has family around him. There was expectations around his ability and his potential, and just sort of the fall from potential that has taken place stinks. It absolutely stinks, and I hate to see it for the kid. I hope everything ends up okay or as okay as it can for him. But man, it's absolutely a yike for me just looking at it and going like, man, that really stinks for Damon Arnett. And like I said, I hope everything turns out okay for him. But rough tumble so far.
I'll take my yike to a more superficial place. However, fellas, we got to talk about the way we talk about guys like Caleb Williams. We are turning into NBA media, and it's not okay. We don't want to be. This is getting to a weird place. I'm not too familiar with NBA media. Most of my exposure to it is what Vikings fans who are also Timberwolves fans, like whatever I kind of hear from those circles. And so there is so much discourse about how Karl Anthony Towns has a funny voice. And how he like shouldn't be an all-star because of it. And I swear to God, if we become that with Caleb Williams because we're going crazy over him painting his nails, get over it. Oh my God. We got to stop doing. I've heard people say like Chop Robinson, and with all earnestness, he's kind of got a nice face. Are you kidding me?
Are we?
Is this
are
who
we
we are?
serious? Are we?
Is this who we are
right now?
Jesus, you say that to his face, man. Say that to his nice face and see how nice it is.
That's wild.
This isn't who we should be. All right. I always thought that the NFL did a good job of keeping things, to on the field. If you had an off-field discussion, it was because someone got in trouble or someone was doing something in the community and you wanted to comment on it. But these sorts of superficial, they just strike me as these like I just want to feel like I'm a little more manly than a football player kind of thing. And boys, we don't got to do that. All right. You keep that in the NBA. Keep that in your Draymond Green whinging, okay? Like, get out of here with that. We can be better than. And by the way, if you're commenting on the fashion choices of a 21-year-old and you're twice that age and you've got like a frumpy Hanes t-shirt in your profile pic, I don't want to hear it. All right, you do not get to talk about fashion with your dad swag, okay? This is a young man's game. All right, it's passed us all by. Okay, this is Gen Z's thing. We got to just leave it to them.
It's all theirs. It's all theirs. They earned it. They deserve it.
Leave your cargo shorts out of this. Okay?
I was gonna say cargo shorts and New Balance. That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, leave your sandals that you got at Target 25 years ago that you only break out to mow the lawn. Get out of here.
I absolutely love it. All right. On that note, we'll wrap it up here on today's episode of Locked On NFL. Make sure you come back tomorrow. James and Chris giving you the breakdown and the early preview of the names to watch at the NFL Scouting Combine for the entertainment, like we were talking about. So we'll have much more for you here all throughout the NFL Combine as well. We have some bonus episodes, bonus coverage live from Indianapolis, or rather from Indianapolis. A bunch of us are going to be out there. So we're bringing you a whole bunch as things continue to roll along. So we appreciate you very much. For Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL, myself, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson. We'll see you here next week on Tuesday. And of course, Locked On NFL will be right back here with you tomorrow here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.